So today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite vegetables from these 6 categories. My favorite tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, squash, beans, and cucumbers. So first we're going to start off with my favorite cucumbers. Now I love growing cucumbers. They're very versatile in the garden, whether you are someone that likes them for slicing or pickling, fresh eating. I find myself really enjoying cucumbers. They're just so refreshing. I mean, nothing quite produces like a cucumber. And if you have a good plant, that one plant can produce 10, 15 cucumbers very easily. And so cucumbers are a fun one to grow. But my 5 favorite I've grown, and I will say that the top 5 from these lists, you know, I have favorites from the year. You guys have sometimes will say, what's your favorite that you grew this year? That doesn't always make it into my top 5 permanent list. And my top 5 permanent list, I will say, is also not very permanent. It changes all the time based on history and the results that I get, because one year is not necessarily an indicator. I might love, like we tried some new cucumbers this past year that I absolutely loved. Are they in my top 5 all time? No, they're not, because I've only tried them one year and I have to try them many different times, many different growing seasons, so that I can guarantee that they're my favorite, because they might vary from year to year. So keep that in mind, that they have history on their side as always being my favorite. And so with that, let's talk about cucumbers. So my first favorite, and this is in order of first to last. Now, just because it's last doesn't mean it's my least favorite. It just means it's the least of my favorites. So keep that in mind as well. I still absolutely love them. And I would, walk across the bed of coals for some of these varieties that are even a number 5. They're so good. But the top of the top for my cucumbers has to be tender green. Tender green cucumber is just the quintessential crisp, beautiful greenhouse cucumber. The skin on the outside is really thin, so it has very little cucurbitacein, which is that kind of the bitterness that you get from a cucumber. It is phenomenal. Absolutely love it. Second is national pickling. When it comes to pickling cucumbers, very few pickling cucumbers rival national pickling in not only the yield, but also the disease resistance. I find that here in Michigan, zone 6A, we tend to get powdery mildew fairly easily on our cucumbers, but when it comes to the national pickling, it is disease resistant. It will not only grow and produce in early season, but also through the midsummer months where it's nice and hot and humid, things start to get a little stressed. It just keeps producing, and I absolutely love it, and it makes a phenomenal, very crisp cucumber, or a pickle I should say. And when we pickle them up, we will pickle them up whole as like tiny little gherkins, or even full-size pickled cucumbers, and they are awesome for snacking. Very crisp, really sweet flavor, and also the seeds inside, when they get larger, don't get too mature to where they get noticeable, even when they are a little larger in size. It's a phenomenal one, and that's why it's at number 2. Number 3 is Muncher. Now, Muncher is a smaller version of tender green. That's why I love it so much, and I've loved it for years, simply because Muncher is a tinier version. It's spineless as well. It is more of like your kind of English style or Armenian style cucumber. They're spineless, and so they are very delicious. They are a wonderful addition to salads, but I will honestly, because they're smaller, I'll just take them and I will just grab a little tub of dill dip, and I will just eat 10 or 15 of them for lunch, and that is my lunch. They are awesome, super productive, very, very easy to grow. Fourth is Poinsett 76. When it comes to a cucumber that is long and large, Poinsett 76 really kind of stands out. Now, you do have other varieties that kind of fall into this category. They're all fairly similar, but what sets the Poinsett 76 apart is the simple fact that they are very consistent in their shape and size. Now, you will sometimes get larger ones, sometimes you'll get smaller ones, but the variation between large and small is really slim. Whereas if you go with something like, any of your other slicing cucumbers, they're all phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, they're all phenomenal. Like Marketmore 76, right? Marketmore 76 is basically interchangeable, but the variation between the large cucumbers and the small cucumbers is very random. You might get some that are really small and some that are really large, depending on the growing conditions that they're put through at that moment. Whereas with Poinsett 76, that's not the case. I am guaranteed very consistent results, and that's awesome for me. Just from a simple standardization standpoint, I like to know what to expect. I also kind of look for size to tell me when it's ready to harvest. That's really important because if you don't have that visual cue of shape and size, something can get away from you and it gets really seedy. That being said, if it does happen to get a little seedy, the seeds are not super bitter and they're not really large, so they don't stand out that much. I really love the Poinsett 76, and I've loved it for years, and that's why it's at number 4. Fifth and final cucumber for you is the Ashley cucumber. Now this has tiny little burrs, but I find that they're almost non-existent. It is also really great because we use it for not only pickling, but fresh eating. It's kind of a medium-sized cucumber, and I know that it's not the most common use to pickle it, but what we use it for, because it's such a sweet, just tender cucumber, is we will use a crinkle cutter and we will make basically like wavy chips of cucumber slices to pickle those, and they are phenomenal. It's kind of our go-to favorite for throwing on things like burgers. It is just amazing, and that's really what we use Ashley for. But also it produces through the heat of summer, and that's something you're not gonna find from a lot of cucumbers. Ashley will continue to produce even when it gets hot and humid, whereas a lot of other cucumber varieties will start to shut down their production. So not only does it produce for a long period, but it does produce a really high quality cucumber. Next, we're gonna talk about squash. Now I'm gonna have to rifle through some of these because otherwise it's gonna be a 30-minute video. And so obviously I gotta put number 1 at Black Beauty. You guys have probably all grown Black Beauty. It is a mainstay in our household. Sweet flesh, super productive. It is just phenomenal. It produces early, starts producing around 45, 50 days. It's just amazing. It might not be the most disease resistant, but that's okay because by the time things like powdery mildew come, we're already just cranking out the zucchinis. Second is the Italian striped. Now the Italian striped zucchini is not very popular for a lot of people, and I don't necessarily know why. It is so disease resistant. I find personally that, it tastes about the same as Black Beauty, doesn't really produce quite as much, but if I'm looking for a disease resistant variety, we can grow this one 2 to 3 times longer than we can like a Black Beauty or a golden zucchini. So I use it for disease resistance. It's a good fallback option. Again, is it as pretty? Not necessarily, but is it gonna produce? Absolutely, and it tastes quite literally exactly the same. 3 is a winter squash. Now a winter squash is going to be like a storage squash, and I love the long pie pumpkin or long pie squash. Now obviously, some are gonna say, well, Luke, that's a pumpkin. It's still a winter squash for me because let me tell you, when I say that the flavor on this is incredible, you guys are sleeping on this one. I've grown it now, I think 5 gardening seasons, didn't grow it last season, and I regretted it. My cousin grew it, and I actually grabbed a couple from him because he grew some, and they are just awesome. They produce an abundant amount of these really long, elongated squash that are just phenomenal. I absolutely love them. And personally, nothing tastes better. You can use them interchangeably as like a butternut squash. You can eat them like that. Or if you want to make things like pumpkin pie, it is great like that as well. It is just awesome. I simply cannot recommend it enough. And the storage life on it, when you properly cure the skin, the storage life is amazing. We can store them well into January, February time, and they've never lasted longer than that because they get consumed, but I imagine they probably could last in cold storage even longer than January. Number 4 is the Bianca di Tresti squash. This is back to a summer squash, and I know that a lot of you have experienced this squash and also love it. It is a crowd favorite, and it is quickly becoming a crowd favorite for a lot of people. Now, the creamy white flesh makes it unique, but let me tell you, the buttery, soft skin is what sets it apart. It does not get grainy, it does not get stringy. Even when it gets slightly larger in size, you might take, like, let's say a Black Beauty zucchini. It's amazing to a certain point, and that's why it's my number 1 favorite squash, because it's just unrivaled. But when it gets larger, that's kind of its Achilles heel, if you will, where it starts to get a little stringy. The Bianca di Tresti, not the case. It stays buttery and soft even until you get a foot and a half long and 4 inches, 5 inches in diameter. It is absolutely incredible, super productive, and it's an amazing Italian variety of summer squash. I highly recommend it. If it's not on your top 5 list, it really should be, because it has been a crowd favorite for the past 3 years for us, and we grow it every single year now. And number 5 is the butternut squash. Now, the butternut squash is actually a squash that we bred. It was a mistake. It was a cross between some other type of squash, and a butternut. And it just grew in our garden from seeds we'd saved from the previous year. We got it from an Amish Mennonite store. We bought a bunch of butternut squash. I loved the flavor. I was anticipating on growing butternut squash, and we got this crazy squash that came out, and it was incredible, not only for the flavor, so sweet, super easy to use, but the long neck on the butternut was really large. It was like 2 or 3 inches in diameter and really long, had a very small seed cavity, meaning we were able to yield like 40% more and waste like probably 40% less because we were able to harvest more of the squash and just basically peel it with a carrot peeler, chop it up, boil it, throw it in the freezer, use it fresh. It is just so awesome, and the storage life on it is great. It's a winter squash, so it's going to last January, February time. Generally, we eat them before that point anyways. It's in our garden every single year. It's just phenomenal. Next are beans. Now, I will say that our garden looks a lot different than other people's garden, especially my top 5. My top 5 are all bush beans, and they're all green bush beans. Now, I do not want you to think that I don't like the midnight black turtle bean. We absolutely grow it. I absolutely love it. I would almost put those in like a shelling bean category. We grow the light red kidney bean. We grow the dark red kidney bean. We grow calypso bean. We have a lot of drying beans that we grow, and we absolutely love them. Totally love them. Good Mother Stallard is another one. Those are all awesome varieties of like soup beans. The Hooterite soup bean would probably, if I had my top 5 favorite list for drying beans, it'd be number 1, hands down. Navy beans, kidney beans, garbanzo beans, we grow them all. We've absolutely loved them. They're all phenomenal. These are green beans though. Green beans are pretty much interchangeable, but what I have found is that for our garden, they really come down to a couple criteria. Stringiness. All these 5 that I'm going to give you are basically stringless. All these 5, they all fit into this criteria. They are highly productive. I need something that's going to produce a ton for me because I don't dedicate that much space to bush beans. Next criteria is they all are going to have to produce through hot weather. Here in Michigan, it goes from cold to hot like that. And in hot weather, beans typically end up shutting down or slow down production. All these 5 typically will produce right through warm weather, and that's great. And then the final criteria that they have to be is they have to be something that will hold up well in the freezer. When we have an abundance, a lot of times it ends up in the freezer for the off season. And certain beans I find get soft and mushy rather than others. So these 5 fit all those criteria. And honestly, I would put them near they're all kind of my top 1. Okay, but I'm going to give you my 5. And number 1 is Antiqua. Not a lot of people know this. It's a French slenderette bean. It's phenomenal. It is so amazing. It's a lot thinner than your other beans, which makes it unique, but it fits all 5 criteria. Second is Provider. Fills in for the name, obviously. Name does enough speaking for itself. It provides. It provides and provides and provides even through hot weather. It fits all those criteria as I previously mentioned. Number 3 is the Blue Lake bush bean. This has been a crowd favorite. It's been a household name. It's basically the Kleenex of beans. Like literally if someone says, oh, are you growing any bush beans? It's usually the Blue Lake bush bean. Like it just is so reliable. And that's what I love about it. It's so consistent with its production, its size, everything about it's phenomenal. 4th is Strike. Obviously nothing more to say about that. It's basically the same thing as Provider and Blue Lake Bush. It's just interchangeable. They produce so well for us. We add them to our garden every single year, and they follow our criteria of things that we look for our favorite bush beans. And the 5th is Contender. Again, basically interchangeable with Strike and Provider, and you got a whole host of Blue Lake Bush and those ones. They're all the same basically, but they are productive, they are reliable, and they are so stringless. Even when they get a little bit larger, they stay stringless, which is great because I hate choking on bean string. Now, this is one you've all been waiting for, but I say this one. Please watch the rest of these as well, even if you're not interested in growing some of these ones. I'm gonna talk about tomatoes. And after tomatoes, I'm gonna talk about lettuce and peppers. But I know all of you want to grow tomatoes, and tomatoes are kind of the star of the garden. And in our garden, we've grown a lot of tomatoes. In fact, every year we average about 30 different varieties of tomatoes. In years past, we grew up to 100 different varieties of tomatoes when we had our tomato patch at my parents' cottage that we rented the land from. I think we've grown in total probably close to 600 different varieties of tomatoes. There are ones that shine and stand out. There are ones that are they're great, but they're really nothing to write home about. So these five, they really stand out, and they stand out for good reason. Now, are they going to be the best in your garden? Not always the case. Certain temperatures, growing zones, just growing conditions in general, really are going to dictate how these perform. They also can have bad years. We've had years where these have not been our favorite, plain and simple. There have been years where we don't even add these to our garden, but again, it's about consistency. More often than not, you grow them 10 seasons, 8 out of those 10 seasons, they're gonna be your favorite. And so with that being said, they're worth trying. The first is the Champagne Bubbles tomato. As I've said before, this is more fruit than tomato. If you like a sweet, low acid cherry tomato, medium skin, amazing bright citrusy flavor, it tastes so amazing and fruity. I've given it to people blindfolded, and truly, mean this, I gave it to my cousin blindfolded, and he didn't even think that it was a tomato. He thought it was a ground cherry. He thought it was an Aunt Molly's ground cherry. And I said, you know what? That's actually such a good guess, because an Aunt Molly's ground cherry tastes more like, it's kind of like fruity. And that's all there really is about it. If you want one of the best, sweetest, most productive, amazing tomatoes ever, Champagne Bubbles is what you're looking for. And that's why it is number 1 on our list. Number 2 is New Yorker, or should I say New Yorker. It's a great one. It's so productive, classic tomato flavor. Now, it is more compact. It's not a true determinant by most standards. It's more of a compact plant, but you're talking productive, so disease resistant, really produces a lot of beautiful medium-sized slicing tomatoes, great juice content, but also real good tomato tang. It is phenomenal for slicing fresh or even canning into sauce, making tomato puree. It is amazing. It's also very crack resistant, which is great because cracking tomatoes really is frustrating, especially when you grow them. You get a little bit of rain, all of a sudden they split and crack because the shelf life just plummets on them once they crack. So these are very crack resistant as well. And I personally just find that they are unrivaled. It's kind of a hidden gem. A lot of people don't usually grow them. We grow them every single year for those reasons. Amazing flavor, amazing productivity, and very reliable. Third is Rosa de Bern. Now, Rosa de Bern was turned on to me by my friend James Prigioni, and he grew Rosa de Bern and talked about it. He swore about it, and I gave it a shot. I gave it a shot 4 years ago, and the first time I tasted it, I said, there's something special there. It is so sweet, so mild in flavor. It's creamy. The seeds are small. It's very juicy though, but it is beautiful. It's kind of a matte pinky red color. It is wow, absolutely wow. It's actually, it's French for tree of roses, which kind of gives it that kind of that rose bush look when they're all ripe. It is phenomenal. It's absolutely one of our favorites. And well, it's our third favorite one we've ever grown. And it's one that I think a lot of people sleep on just because there's so many tomato varieties. You really can never go wrong growing a tomato. Obviously, there's a bunch of contenders that are going to be near our favorites. But if I had to pick, if there was like 5 tomato varieties, I would add to my garden forever and be content. It'd be in there. So Rosa de Bern, it's a phenomenal one. Number 4 is Opolka. Now, Opolka is a paste tomato. And the reason why I have this in my favorites list is because the Opolka is something that, you know, a lot of people, when they look at paste tomatoes, they turn to like a Roma or a San Marzano. And Opolka is one of the sweetest paste tomatoes, still while having a good amount of acid for things like canned tomatoes, but it is so balanced in flavor. Huge tomatoes, giant, meaty tomatoes, super productive, and when they're canned, they hold up true, like very good true shape. They don't get all mushy and soft when you can them. That's really important when we do whole canned tomatoes. But also for making a sauce, they're super low moisture, almost non-existent seed cavity. Like you really can hardly even find seeds in them. A very little gel, and like I said, such a balanced, mild flavor. They're top tier tomatoes. And then the 5th and final tomato is pineapple. Now pineapple, you probably already knew pineapple was on this list. Pineapple is one that we grow every single year. It is fruity, it is sweet, it is so low acid. But on top of that, they're giant. They're honking big 2-pound tomatoes. And it puts a smile on my face when I think about how big they've gotten. The largest tomato we ever grew from a pineapple tomato was 2 pounds, 3 ounces, which is small in comparison to how big they can actually get. It's a bicolor tomato, so it's a red-yellow bicolor. On top of that, it's a beefsteak, so there's very little seeds, very little gel. It makes it awesome for slicing, for salads, burgers, sandwiches, BLTs, or just tomato sandwiches. Or just slice a huge slice off because it's so creamy and soft. That's the other thing. The texture, it's not mealy. Sometimes you get these mealy tomatoes, not the greatest. I've never had a mealy pineapple tomato ever. Throw a little salt on, it is phenomenal. A+. So those are my top 5 favorite tomatoes. And obviously, there's a lot of tomatoes that this was near impossible. There's a lot of tomatoes that are close runner-ups. I'd say there's probably 15 or 20 different tomatoes that are close runner-ups that easily could have been on this list. So if your favorite tomato wasn't on this list, that's okay too. That's what the comments box is for. Let me know in the comments box. I'd love to know kind of what you think about these tomato varieties. Up next are peppers. Now, when I looked at my favorite peppers, I just looked at them pretty subjectively. Are they my favorite? So obviously, if you're not a hot pepper lover, I'm not a crazy hot pepper lover. You see my reaction to eating the world's hottest pepper, but I'm not a big hot pepper fan, really, truly not. There's a time and place for it, but it's not in my top 5, whereas you might love hot peppers. And so again, take this with a grain of salt. It's kind of like beans. I don't have my top 5 hot peppers, top 5 bell peppers, just my top 5 in general. And the first is the Emerald Giant Bell. Now, when it comes to bell peppers, this one stands apart in its just monstrous size. Whether you make fajitas or stuffed bell peppers or you just slice them up, they're really sweet as well. They are such a sweet, you don't get a lot of that greeniness, that green bell pepper taste that a lot of people don't like. I don't mind it necessarily, but I know I could see how it could turn people off. You don't get that. Very crisp, really water rich, so sweet. Not the most productive pepper in the world, but holy cow, if you're looking for a blocky, honking, big bell pepper, you're gonna get it with the Emerald Giant. It is probably one of the largest bell peppers that I've ever grown. Second is California Wonder. Now, California Wonder, it's a lot like Blue Lake Bush Bean. Everybody grows it. If you grow bell peppers, you probably have grown the California Wonder. It's the Kleenex of the pepper world. It is just so consistent, so reliable. It's disease resistant. It'll produce basically, regardless of where you plant it, it is phenomenal. And that's simply why it's number 2. I'm looking for something that's productive, that tastes great, obviously, but is disease resistant, and it's just very consistent from year to year to year. So that's why it's number 2. Number 3 is the Fresno chili. Now, this is it's a mild pepper. It's got some heat. It's not crazy hot, but it's got a little, hey, I'm here. I'm gonna give you a little tingle, but nothing's gonna burn your face off. I like that. I love to roast them up. I like to stuff them. I make Fresno chili dip. It is just it's such a great pepper. It's sweet with a little bit of heat. It's just phenomenal all around. I also will even pickle them. They are fantastic. Pickled with a little bit of cheese stuffed in there, like blue cheese stuffed inside. Amazing. You should try it if you haven't. It is incredible. Or throw some of the slices up onto like French dip sandwich or like a Chicago style beef sandwich. Amazing. It's really good. Number 4 is the Tam jalapeno. Now, when it comes to jalapenos, there's a lot of different varieties. Early jalapeno and Tam jalapeno, they're basically interchangeable. The reason why I go for Tam, though, is it's a little less hot, but they're also a little larger and pointier that allow for, if I'm making things like jalapeno poppers, it's a little more versatile in my opinion. Early jalapeno is more productive. You're gonna get a lot more jalapenos from an early jalapeno than you do a Tam jalapeno, but in terms of use, I don't need a ton of them. I don't need to grow a bushel of them. We're gonna use them, we're gonna pickle them, we're gonna eat them fresh, we're gonna grill them up, throw them on tacos, whatever, and they are awesome. So in my opinion, the Tam jalapeno, a little more mild, not as hot, and it's a little more versatile, which is why it's on my list. And it's a very easy decision for me. We love growing jalapenos because they are it's the threshold between, this is uncomfortable, and wow, that's delicious. It's right on that fine line. It's walking that tightrope, which is kind of fun too. And the 5th is Big Jim. Now, Big Jim is an Italian grilling pepper. And when it comes to Italian grilling pepper, they are so productive and so delicious. Now, we grow Big Jim every single year. I don't recall a season we haven't grown it. And every single year, we get these behemoth grilling peppers that are like long and pointy, and they will get like 8 to 10, 12 inches long. These peppers are huge. And when you slice those suckers up and you grill them up, It really isn't much better, in my opinion, in the summertime than a nice grilled pepper. It is not spicy, I think, at all. I mean, some people might detect a little bit of heat. In my opinion, it's just sweet and delicious. And when you grill them up, there's nothing better. And finishing up here with lettuce. Thank you guys so much for bearing with me and watching to this point. If you have gotten to this point, I want to ask all of you to please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure you check out MIgardener.com for all of these seeds. I know that you guys know we sell seeds, but I also know there's a lot of you that are watching for the very first time that did not know we have seeds. All these seeds that I'm listing off are seeds you can find over at MIgardener.com. We have over 750 different heirloom vegetable seeds, all for $2 a pack. $2 a pack, and we offer free shipping on seed orders of $20 or more. So there's really no reason not to check them out. And honestly, if you like supporting the show, you like what we do, it helps support that. And so I really, really appreciate it. But I also know that if you're on a tight budget or you've already bought your seeds, keep us in mind, bookmark us, but at least like this video because that helps spread this content around to more people that might like some ideas. When you look at the sea of options, sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming. And so this kind of helps to narrow down. You can at least kind of say, well, Luke likes this. So if Luke likes it, maybe I'll like it as well. So with that, let's talk about our favorite varieties of lettuce, because there's actually a ton of different lettuce varieties, and I've grown a lot of them. I think I've grown 50 or 60 different varieties of lettuce over the years. And so I've kind of gotten to narrow them down to my top 5. It was pretty difficult, but it was also kind of a fun one. Number 1, and you guys probably saw this one coming, is Tango. Tango leaf lettuce is a crunchy, crinkly leaf lettuce. It grows super well through cold weather. It is just such an awesome texture that adds fun textures to salads, which makes eating salads a little more fun. It is very slow to get bitter. It doesn't tolerate the heat quite as well, but it does not get bitter like other lettuces do. It doesn't get that milky sap in there quite so fast. It is awesome. And honestly, when it comes to growing Tango lettuce, I probably grow Tango every single year simply because of the flavor and the texture. It is really great. Second, this one actually came on the scene really recent, but just like the Bianca de Tresti squash, a lot of you have kind of come onto the Pablo lettuce. Pablo lettuce has quickly become one of our all-time favorite lettuces for good reason. It is a bicolored lettuce. It's actually a crisp head, like an iceberg lettuce, that transitions from green to red, meaning that the inside leaves are going to be, like the tops of the leaves are going to be red, but the inside, like the lower portion of the leaf, is green, giving you this like ombre green-red lettuce. It is insane, and the texture is crisp as well. It's just like unbelievable. It's phenomenal. So I had to put it at number 2. It's like everybody's favorite. Everyone that I grow it for is like, this is insane. And then I have to tell them what variety it is because they always ask, I need to add this to my garden. What is this? So Pablo is a very easy number 2. Number 3 is the Hanson Improved Crisp Head. Now, again, this is a crisp head, much like Pablo or Iceberg if you've grown that. It is crispy. It is crunchy, water rich. It is so good for making chopped salads, lettuce wraps. It is just phenomenal. We really love it. It does not get bitter quite that fast. Tolerates cold weather pretty well. Tolerates warm weather pretty well. It's an heirloom. It's been grown for decades, but it is so, so delicious. Really crisp, really little bitterness at all. But it just provides that nice crunch to a salad that you're looking for to kind of add that texture and that interest to a good salad. Number 4 is Ruby Red. Now, Ruby Red, this is probably one of the cold hardiest lettuces that we grow. But not only that, but it also tolerates heat pretty well as well. It is one that gets bitter very little, and it has this absolutely amazing deep red, almost purpley color that comes from anthocyanins. Anthocyanins is a chemical compound that you should eat more of. You should eat your foods of color. Eating red foods, purple foods are so good for you, so incredibly good for you. And let me tell you, the anthocyanin levels in Ruby Red leaf lettuce are off the charts. We add them to almost every single spring mix salad that we make. It is phenomenal. But because of that deep red color, I find that the deep red lettuces, regardless of what type you're going with, deep red lettuces typically are not only more cold tolerant, but also more heat tolerant, I find in my experience. And so because of that, you should really try growing it because it just opens up more possibilities. If your window to grow lettuce is here, Ruby Red or any type of red lettuce takes it to here. you can expand your window, meaning more time to grow more food for your family or yourself, and just more time to experience homegrown vegetables, which is great. And the fifth and final lettuce variety and the final vegetable in this top 5 list here that we've had is Bib Butterhead. Now, I could not have a top 5 lettuce list without Bib Butterhead. It is one that we started growing about 14, 15 years ago. It was one of the very first lettuces that I actually threw in our garden, and for good reason. It is so soft and it just doesn't really feel like lettuce. It's got such a beautiful, soft texture to it, very little crunch, but it just gives a wonderful fluffiness to salads. It sounds strange, but if you have tried throwing a butterhead lettuce into a salad, you know what I'm talking about. It just adds fluff. I don't know how to describe it. It just fluffs your salad. So it's not all crunch, it's not all texture. It just adds this great kind of pillowiness to your salad that just adds this beautiful creaminess. Not only that, but it's very sweet, really slow to get bitter. And I find, honestly, that we grow it more often than we don't. I want to say it's probably been in at least 10 of our gardens for the past 14 years. So it's like I said, it's in almost every single year's garden. And that's just because it's got phenomenal flavor. Now, it is also slightly interchangeable with the Bib Butterhead, the Little Gem Butterhead, the Tom Thumb Butterhead. There's so many different Butterheads that fall into this category, but Bib Butterhead being probably the largest of the Butterhead and the one we've grown the most and the one we probably like the most as well, just because you get a little more out of it when you harvest a larger lettuce head. So with that is my top 5. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you all learned something new. If you were inspired to try any of these, again, go head over to MIgardener.com or let me know in the comments box down below if you have tried them, your thoughts. Heck, if you hate them, let me know as well and why you hate them. I would love to know. And I think it's just kind of fun to bounce these varieties off each other so that we can find new varieties. And also, let me know your top 5 for as many things as you want. List off as many favorite varieties as you want. There might be some varieties I've never grown, and that's how we find new favorite varieties. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger. Take care. Bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider clicking this one. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I want to thank you for your viewership because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. It's free, and we upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. We also have vegetable seeds, fertilizer, or tools. If you need any of those, consider visiting MIgardener.com. Links will be in the description box below. We've got you covered. And as always, we'll see you all in the garden. Take care.